Picture this: you're standing in the middle of a bustling modern city when the skies open up. Within minutes, streets turn into rivers, sidewalks vanish under murky water, and traffic grinds to a halt as drains choke on the deluge. It's a scene that's become all too familiar, a symbol of how fragile our infrastructure really is. Now, rewind the clock 4,000 years. In the heart of the Indus Valley, or along the cobbled streets of ancient Rome, heavy rains wouldn't trigger chaos. Instead, water would glide through meticulously designed channels, disappearing as if by magic. These civilizations built drainage systems so advanced, so resilient, that they're still operational today, long after the cities around them crumbled into dust. How is it possible that structures older than history itself outlast the concrete jungles we build today? The answer lies in a forgotten philosophy of engineering, one that prioritized harmony with nature, foresight over haste, and craftsmanship over convenience. Ancient builders didn't just construct drains, they crafted legacies. They used materials that healed themselves, designs that danced with gravity, and layouts that turned entire cities into living, breathing ecosystems. While modern systems falter under the weight of neglect and short-term thinking, these ancient marvels whisper secrets we've stopped listening to. What if the key to solving today's flooding crises isn't some cutting-edge technology, but wisdom buried in the ruins beneath our feet? This isn't just a story about pipes and canals, it's a revelation about human ingenuity. From the self-cleaning sewers of Mohenjo-Daro to the volcanic ash concrete of Rome, these systems were born from a deep understanding of the world and a commitment to the future. They weren't built for the next election cycle or budget report, but for generations yet unborn, and that's why they endured. In this video, we'll journey through time to uncover these hidden blueprints for resilience. You'll see how ancient engineers turned water from a threat into an ally, and how their breakthroughs could rewrite the rules of modern urban survival. So let's step into the past, because the solutions we've been searching for have been here all along, waiting for us to remember. Ancient civilizations didn't just stumble upon effective drainage, they engineered it with a level of foresight that puts modern shortcuts to shame. Take the Indus Valley, for example. Over 4,000 years ago, their cities boasted underground sewer networks so advanced, they wouldn't look out of place today. Every street was lined with precisely laid bricks, angled to guide wastewater into covered drains that ran beneath the city. These weren't just ditches, they were part of an interconnected system, complete with manholes for maintenance, a concept we still rely on. The Harappans understood something we often forget. Drainage isn't just about moving water, it's about safeguarding public health, preventing disease, and ensuring a city's very survival. Then there's Rome's Cloaca Maxima, a marvel so robust it's still in use after 2,600 years. Originally built to drain marshland, this arched stone channel evolved into the backbone of Rome's sanitation. What's astonishing isn't just its durability, but its adaptability. As Rome grew, the system expanded without collapsing under its own scale, a lesson for modern metros struggling with outdated infrastructure. The Romans didn't just build for their own time, they built for eternity, choosing materials like volcanic tuff and hydraulic concrete that actually strengthened with exposure to water. But here's the real revelation. These systems weren't standalone projects. They were woven into the fabric of urban life. In Mohenjo-Daro, drains were integrated into house designs, with chutes directing waste from bathrooms straight into the street channels. In Rome, the Cloaca Maxima doubled as a civic monument. its entrance adorned with statues, a reminder that even functional infrastructure could inspire pride. This holistic approach is worlds apart from today's piecemeal solutions, where drains are an afterthought, buried under asphalt and ignored until they fail. What united these ancient engineers wasn't just skill, but philosophy. They saw water as a force to be respected, not conquered. Their designs worked with gravity, terrain, and seasonal flows, turning natural processes into allies. Modern cities, by contrast, often fight against nature, relying on pumps and chemicals to solve problems that ancient systems prevented through smart design. The difference: one approach builds resilience, the other breeds dependency. Perhaps the most humbling detail lies in the upkeep. These civilizations didn't just construct and walk away. The Harappans designed their drains with smooth, curved interiors to minimize clogs, while Roman laws held homeowners responsible for maintaining the sections near their properties. Compare that to today's neglected storm drains, clogged with debris until the next flood headlines. The ancients knew longevity wasn't just about materials, it was about culture. When a society values its infrastructure as sacred, it endures. As we peel back the layers of these ancient systems, their genius becomes undeniable. They mastered what modern engineering often overlooks: simplicity aligned with natural laws, materials that age with grace, and a commitment to collective stewardship. These weren't just feats of engineering, they were acts of wisdom, blueprints for cities that could truly stand the test of time. What made ancient drainage systems stand the test of time wasn't just smart design, it was the extraordinary materials they were built with. Think about Roman concrete, a mix so revolutionary that modern scientists are still trying to crack its code. Unlike today's concrete, which crumbles under seawater, Roman builders blended volcanic ash with lime, creating a chemical reaction that actually strengthened their structures over centuries. When tiny cracks formed, minerals in the water would seep in and crystallize, essentially healing the material from within. It's like the concrete had its own immune system, constantly repairing itself against the wear and tear of time. Then there's the Indus Valley, where engineers crafted drains from precisely baked bricks, each one uniform in size and shape, fitted together with a waterproof sealant made from natural bitumen. This wasn't just glue, it was a barrier against leaks, flexible enough to shift with the ground without breaking apart. Compare that to modern pipes, rigid and prone to cracking under pressure. The Harappans understood something we often overlook. Materials shouldn't just resist damage, they should adapt to it. Even more impressive is how these civilizations sourced their materials locally, turning environmental challenges into advantages. The Romans didn't have to import volcanic ash. They used what the land provided, reducing waste and transportation costs. The Minoans molded terracotta pipes from the clay beneath their feet, creating lightweight yet sturdy channels that resisted earthquakes. These weren't just practical choices, they were sustainable ones, long before the word entered our vocabulary. Today's engineers are finally catching up, with labs testing Roman-inspired concrete for coastal cities and researchers studying bitumen mixes for eco-friendly infrastructure. But the real lesson goes beyond recipes. Ancient builders didn't just pick materials, they understood them. They knew how each component would behave under stress, in water, across generations. That depth of knowledge is what we've lost in the race for cheaper, faster solutions. The irony: many of these ancient materials were simpler than what we use now. No synthetic polymers, no industrial additives, just raw elements combined with precision. Yet they outperformed modern counterparts because they worked with nature, not against it. When Roman concrete got wet, it didn't degrade, it thrived. When Indus Valley bricks expanded in the heat, they didn't crack, they flexed, perhaps the most humbling part. These materials weren't secret. Their formulas were right there in the ruins, waiting for us to pay attention. Now, as modern cities face crumbling pipes and flooded streets, the past isn't just offering answers, it's showing us how to think differently. The right materials don't just build infrastructure, they build legacies, and that's a lesson worth remembering. The brilliance of ancient drainage systems wasn't just in their construction, it was in their seamless integration with the city itself. Picture the streets of Mohenjo-Daro laid out in a perfect grid, each one gently sloping toward the edges where covered drains waited. This wasn't random, it was a masterclass in hydraulic engineering. Every inch of pavement was angled to guide rainwater away from homes and into channels, preventing pooling and erosion. Compare that to modern cities, where roads often flatten or dip haphazardly, creating pockets of flooding the moment a storm hits. The Harappans didn't just build drains, they sculpted entire landscapes to serve them. Roman aqueducts took a different but equally ingenious approach. Instead of fighting gravity, they harnessed it. These towering structures carried water across valleys and hills, maintaining a steady downhill gradient so precise that some channels dropped only a few centimeters every kilometer. The result, a self-sustaining flow that required no pumps or external power, just the immutable laws of physics. Today, many cities rely on energy-intensive systems to move water uphill, a costly and fragile solution when nature already offers a better way. But the real magic lay in how these systems adapted to their environments. In the monsoon-drenched Indus Valley, drains were designed to handle sudden deluges with wider channels and overflow outlets. In arid Persia, qanats tapped into underground water tables, shielding precious liquid from evaporation. These weren't one-size-fits-all solutions, they were tailored responses to local conditions, something modern planners often ignore when replicating standardized designs across diverse climates. Modern drainage, by contrast, often treats water as an afterthought. Pipes are buried beneath streets laid out for cars, not flow. Storm drains are slapped onto existing grids like band-aids, leading to bottlenecks when capacity is overwhelmed. Ancient engineers would have winced at the disconnection. Their designs treated water as a central player in urban life, not a nuisance to be hidden. Perhaps the most striking difference is maintenance. The Harappans built their drains with smooth, curved interiors to minimize debris buildup, while Roman sewers included access points for regular cleaning. These features weren't luxuries, they were acknowledgments that even the best designs need care. Today's out-of-sight, out-of-mind mentality leaves systems clogged until disaster strikes. The ancients didn't just build for function, they built for longevity, knowing that a city's survival depended on it. What emerges from these examples isn't just technical skill, but a philosophy. Ancient drainage was never standalone. It was part of a dialogue between earth, water, and human need. Streets, buildings, and waterways worked in concert, each element reinforcing the others. In an era of climate crises, this holistic thinking isn't just history, it's a roadmap. The solutions to our most pressing challenges might not lie in the next technological breakthrough, but in the quiet wisdom of civilizations that thrived for millennia by working with the world, not against it. The most striking difference between ancient and modern drainage systems isn't just their durability, it's their humility. Ancient engineers didn't bulldoze landscapes to force water into submission. They listened to the land and adapted. Take the Minoans of Crete, who crafted terracotta pipes that snaked along the natural curves of hillsides. These weren't rigid, straight-line installations but flexible networks that moved with the terrain, minimizing soil disruption and preventing erosion. By working with the land's existing slopes, they avoided the destructive runoff that plagues modern cities, where rainwater barrels down artificial gradients, stripping away topsoil and overwhelming drains. Mesopotamia offers another masterclass in environmental harmony. Their canals weren't just for drainage, they were lifelines, channeling floodwaters to irrigate crops during dry seasons. This dual-purpose design transformed potential disasters into resources, turning unpredictable rivers into allies. Compare that to today's stormwater systems, which often treat rainwater as waste to be expelled as quickly as possible, wasting a precious resource while straining infrastructure. The Mesopotamians understood something we've forgotten. Water isn't the enemy, it's a partner. Even the layout of ancient cities reflected this reverence for natural systems. The Harappans built their settlements on elevated mounds, allowing floods to flow around rather than through them. In Peru, the Nazca people carved spiral-shaped puquios into the desert, funneling groundwater to the surface using wind pressure, a passive, energy-free solution to arid conditions. These innovations shared a common thread. They observed and amplified nature's rhythms rather than overriding them. Modern engineering, by contrast, often treats landscapes as blank slates. Wetlands are paved over, rivers are straightened into concrete chutes, and natural floodplains become shopping districts. When heavy rains come, these altered landscapes rebel. Water, denied its historical pathways, surges into streets and basements. The consequences are measurable. Urban areas now experience faster, fiercer floods because hardened surfaces accelerate runoff instead of absorbing it. The irony: ancient solutions often required less effort in the long run. The Minoan terracotta pipes, for example, needed fewer repairs because their gradual slopes prevented the violent scouring that cracks modern pipes. Mesopotamian canals stayed clear of silt because their gentle flows allowed sediment to settle naturally rather than accumulating in bottlenecks. These systems weren't just sustainable, they were self-regulating. Today, a handful of forward-thinking cities are rediscovering this wisdom. Green infrastructure, like permeable pavements and urban wetlands, mimics ancient approaches by letting water seep slowly into the ground. But these projects remain exceptions, not the norm. The real shift needed isn't just technological but philosophical, recognizing that the best drainage systems don't conquer nature, they collaborate with it. When we design like the ancients, we don't just solve flooding, we restore balance. Ancient civilizations understood something we've largely forgotten. Infrastructure isn't a one-time project, it's a living system that demands ongoing care. The Romans didn't just construct the Cloaca Maxima and walk away. They established entire guilds of workers known as aquarii, whose sole job was to inspect, clean, and repair the city's drains. Armed with bronze tools and an almost religious dedication to their craft, these teams would wade through waist-deep water, scraping away sediment and patching cracks before they could escalate into collapses. This wasn't emergency response, it was ritualized prevention, a rhythm of upkeep as regular as the changing seasons. The Harappans took a different but equally ingenious approach. Their underground drains weren't just buried and ignored, they were designed for accessibility. At regular intervals, they installed carefully placed brick manholes, some large enough for a person to descend and clear blockages. These weren't crude openings but architectural features, often located at strategic bends where debris accumulated. Even their brickwork served a maintenance purpose. The smooth, curved interiors of their channels minimized places for sludge to cling, allowing water to scour the pipes clean naturally during heavy flows. Compare this to modern maintenance, or more often, the lack of it. Today's storm drains are frequently treated as out-of-sight relics, only addressed when backups flood streets or sewage spills into rivers. Camera inspections and robotic cleaners exist, but they're deployed reactively after problems arise. The ancient mindset was fundamentally different. Maintenance wasn't a cost, it was an investment in permanence. The brilliance of these systems lay in their adaptability. When Rome's population exploded, the Cloaca Maxima didn't just crumble under the strain. It was expanded with new tributary channels, its original design allowing for organic growth. In contrast, modern cities often retrofit drainage as an afterthought, bolting on patches that strain under increasing demand. The ancients built with future generations in mind, crafting systems that could evolve without collapsing under their own complexity. Perhaps the most telling detail, ancient societies institutionalized maintenance. Roman law held property owners responsible for keeping the drains near their homes clear, blending civic duty with legal obligation. In Mohenjo-Daro, the uniformity of drains across neighborhoods suggests centralized oversight. A prehistoric public works department. These weren't ad hoc solutions but cultural priorities woven into the fabric of daily life. Today, we have better tools but weaker systems. High-pressure jets can clean pipes in minutes, yet chronic underfunding leaves them idle. Sensors can detect clogs before they cause harm, but budgets prioritize visible projects over invisible upkeep. The lesson from antiquity isn't about technology, it's about philosophy. Enduring infrastructure requires more than brilliant engineering. It needs a society that values stewardship over short-term convenience. When we emulate that mindset, our cities won't just function, they'll last. Ancient engineers didn't just build for fair weather, they designed drainage systems to withstand nature's fury. In the desert city of Petra, the Nabateans faced a brutal paradox: scarce water most of the year, then violent flash floods during rare rains. Their solution: they carved intricate channels directly into the sandstone cliffs, creating a network that would catch sudden downpours and redirect them safely around the city. These weren't just ditches, they were calculated interventions, positioned at precise angles to break the force of rushing water while harvesting every precious drop into cisterns. When modern archaeologists studied these systems after a rare desert storm, they found the ancient channels had performed exactly as intended, diverting floodwaters that would have otherwise destroyed the city's fragile structures. Halfway across the world, the Chinese confronted a different water challenge: seasonal monsoons that could transform rivers into torrents. In Duzhongyan, engineers 2,200 years ago built a sprawling irrigation and flood control system that still functions today. Its genius lay in a series of spillways and diversion channels that automatically adjusted to water levels. During droughts, the system prioritized irrigation canals. When floods came, excess water would naturally spill into designated floodplains, protecting downstream settlements. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a dynamic conversation with the environment, one that required no human intervention to switch modes. What's startling is how these systems anticipated climate variability. The ancient Mayans, for instance, constructed reservoirs with elaborate filtration systems during wet periods, knowing droughts would come. When Spanish conquistadors arrived centuries later, they marveled at cities where water flowed reliably despite seasonal extremes. These civilizations didn't have climate models or satellite data. They observed patterns across generations and built accordingly. Their solutions embodied a long-term perspective that's painfully absent in much modern planning, where drainage systems are often designed for historical weather patterns rather than future uncertainties. The contrast with contemporary failures is stark. Modern cities frequently experience catastrophic flooding because their rigid systems can't adapt when storms exceed predicted intensities. Ancient networks, by contrast, often incorporated overflow zones, areas deliberately left undeveloped to absorb excess water. In Anka, the Khmer Empire built vast barrage reservoirs that acted like shock absorbers during heavy rains, then slowly released water during dry months. This dual-purpose approach treated floods not as disasters to prevent, but as resources to manage. Perhaps the most impressive ancient innovations emerged where disasters were most frequent. In earthquake-prone regions like Crete, the Minoans used flexible terracotta pipes that could shift with tremors without breaking. In tsunami-vulnerable coastal India, Chola dynasty engineers constructed drainage systems with seaward outlets that doubled as pressure valves during storm surges. These weren't just technical solutions, they represented a fundamental understanding that resilience means bending without breaking. Today, as climate change amplifies weather extremes, these ancient strategies feel eerily prescient. They prove that durability isn't about building stronger barriers, but about creating systems that adapt to changing conditions. The past shows us that the most resilient cities aren't those that battle nature, but those that listen to it. Ancient civilizations didn't just build drainage systems, they wove them into the very culture of daily life. In Mohenjo-Daro, keeping drains clear wasn't a chore left to distant officials, it was a shared ritual. Archaeologists have found evidence that homes were designed with chutes connecting directly to street channels, and residents took pride in maintaining these pathways. Broken pottery or debris in a drain wasn't just a nuisance, it was seen as a communal failing. This mindset transformed infrastructure maintenance from a bureaucratic task into a point of civic pride, something woven into the social fabric as tightly as festivals or trade. Rome took a more formal approach, but with the same underlying principle, collective responsibility. Laws like the Lex Cloacaria required property owners to keep the sections of drains near their land clear, with fines for neglect. But it wasn't just fear of punishment that motivated compliance. The Cloaca Maxima was celebrated as a symbol of Roman ingenuity, its entrance adorned with statues of deities. Citizens didn't just tolerate their role in upkeep, they saw it as participation in something greater, a way to honor the empire's legacy. This blend of legal obligation and cultural reverence created a system where maintenance wasn't outsourced, it was owned. Compare this to modern cities where drains are invisible until they fail. Most people couldn't point to a storm drain in their neighborhood, let alone describe how to care for it. Maintenance is siloed behind municipal departments, and residents often view infrastructure as someone else's problem. The result: clogged catch basins go unreported, and minor blockages snowball into floods. The disconnect isn't just logistical, it's psychological. When infrastructure feels alien, people disengage, yet glimpses of the ancient model persist. In Tokyo's flood-prone neighborhoods, community groups map local drains and organize cleanups before monsoon season. In Copenhagen, residents co-design green infrastructure for their streets, blending drainage with parks and playgrounds. These projects thrive because they tap into something timeless, the human desire to shape the places we inhabit. When people feel connected to their infrastructure, they protect it, not out of obligation, but because it's theirs. The lesson isn't about recreating exact ancient practices, but rediscovering their ethos. Modern technology could make community involvement easier than ever. Imagine apps that gamify reporting clogged drains, or neighborhood workshops teaching simple maintenance. But tools alone aren't enough. The real shift is cultural, recognizing that the health of a city's veins depends on the hands of those who walk its streets. Ancient societies didn't just build drains to last, they built relationships with them, and that's what made all the difference. Even the greatest civilizations weren't immune to failure, and their crumbling drainage systems often signaled deeper collapses. Take the Maya, whose intricate reservoirs and canals once supported millions in the jungles of Central America. For centuries, their water management was a marvel, with underground cisterns called choltons storing rainwater for dry seasons. But as populations grew, the system strained. Trees were cleared for farmland, disrupting natural water absorption. Canals silted up without regular cleaning. Then, when prolonged droughts hit, the overextended networks couldn't compensate. The result: thirst, crop failures, and ultimately, the abandonment of iconic cities like Tikal. This wasn't just bad luck, it was a slow-motion unraveling caused by ignoring the delicate balance between human need and environmental limits. Across the Mediterranean, the Byzantines inherited Rome's legendary drainage systems, then let them crumble. As political turmoil drained resources, maintenance crews vanished. The Cloaca Maxima's tributaries clogged with debris, turning streets into swamps. Without functioning drains, diseases like malaria surged, weakening an empire already under siege. The lesson here isn't just about neglect, it's about how infrastructure decay can amplify societal collapse. A single blocked sewer might seem minor, but multiply that by thousands and suddenly a city becomes uninhabitable. These failures share a common thread: short-term thinking. The Maya expanded recklessly, assuming rains would always return. The Byzantines prioritized immediate crises over long-term upkeep. Both missteps mirror modern dilemmas, like cities that repurpose floodplains for development, only to face catastrophic flooding later. Yet some ancient collapses offer unexpected hope. In Petra, earthquakes destroyed sections of the Nabatean drainage network, but survivors adapted, rerouting channels around damaged cliffs. Their flexibility bought the city extra centuries of life. That's the takeaway: failure isn't inevitable if societies respond with humility and innovation. The past's greatest warning isn't that systems fail, it's that recovery is possible, but only if we heed the signs before disaster strikes. Today's drainage systems face a paradox: they're more advanced than ever in theory, yet crumble faster in practice. The heart of the problem lies in a shift in priorities. Where ancient engineers obsessed over durability, modern projects often chase the lowest upfront cost. Cheap PVC pipes might save money during installation, but they crack under pressure within decades, while Roman concrete aqueducts stand strong after millennia. This short-term calculus ignores the staggering price of constant repairs. Cities now spend millions patching systems that should have lasted centuries, trapped in a cycle of digging up streets to replace what should have been built right the first time. Urban sprawl magnifies these flaws. Ancient cities like Mohenjo-Daro were carefully planned with drainage at their core, but modern metros expand haphazardly, bolting drainage onto existing grids like an afterthought. Subdivisions sprout overnight with storm drains sized for yesterday's rainfall data, not tomorrow's superstorms. The result: neighborhoods where a heavy rain turns roads into rivers because the pipes beneath simply can't handle the volume they were never designed for. Unlike the Harappans, who tailored their systems to local conditions, many modern developments copy-paste generic designs across wildly different climates. Climate change exposes these weaknesses ruthlessly. Ancient systems thrived because they anticipated variability. The Nabateans built for both drought and deluge. Today's infrastructure, designed for historical weather patterns, buckles under unprecedented storms. Houston's floods, for instance, revealed how concrete-covered landscapes funnel water faster than drains can process it, a problem the Minoans avoided by letting their terracotta networks follow natural drainage paths. The most glaring gap: adaptability. Rome's Cloaca Maxima evolved over centuries, expanding gracefully as the city grew. modern systems, locked in rigid materials and bureaucratic inertia, struggle to scale. When population density spikes, engineers often just add pumps rather than rethinking the design, a brute force solution that guzzles energy and fails during blackouts. Ancient builders would have winced at such inelegance. Their gravity-fed systems required no electricity, just intelligent gradients. Yet for all these shortcomings, the fix isn't reinventing the wheel, it's relearning it. Some cities are already blending old and new wisdom. Amsterdam's water squares, inspired by ancient spillway concepts, double as playgrounds in dry weather and flood basins during rains. Tokyo's underground cisterns echo Roman reservoirs but with modern sensors. The solutions exist. What's needed is the humility to admit that 4,000 years of experience might just know better. Buried beneath the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro lies one of history's most astonishing feats of engineering, a drainage network so sophisticated it rivals modern sewer systems. Picture this: every street in the city lined with precisely laid brick channels, each one angled to carry wastewater into larger underground conduits. These weren't just ditches, they were part of a meticulously planned grid, with manholes at regular intervals for inspection and cleaning. The Harappans didn't stumble upon this design, they engineered it with a level of precision that suggests advanced understanding of hydraulics and urban planning. What's even more remarkable, these systems weren't just functional, they were hygienic. Covered drains prevented contamination, while sedimentation tanks allowed debris to settle before water flowed onward, a rudimentary form of filtration that kept their cities cleaner than many medieval European towns centuries later. The genius of these systems extended beyond their construction. The Harappans integrated drainage into the very fabric of daily life. Homes featured chutes that connected directly to street channels, ensuring waste never lingered. Bathrooms in wealthy residences even had sloping floors that guided water toward drains, a feature that wouldn't become common again until the modern era. This wasn't just about convenience, it was a public health revolution. By preventing stagnant water, they minimized breeding grounds for disease-carrying pests, a concern that still plagues cities today. Archaeologists have found remarkably few traces of waterborne illnesses in Harappan remains, a testament to how effectively their systems worked. But perhaps the most striking detail is their foresight. These drains weren't just built for the Harappans' immediate needs, they were designed to adapt. Channels were oversized to handle monsoon surges, and their uniform brick construction allowed for easy repairs. The system even accounted for urban growth, with later expansions seamlessly tying into the original network. Compare that to modern cities, where aging sewers often collapse under the strain of population booms, forcing costly overhauls. The Harappans built with a vision that stretched generations, a stark contrast to today's short-term infrastructure cycles. What can we learn from these underground marvels? First, that durability requires intentional design, not just durable materials. The Harappans chose baked bricks for their resistance to water, but they also shaped every component from the curvature of the channels to the placement of access points to minimize wear. Second, they prove that effective drainage isn't just about moving water, it's about integrating systems into the rhythms of daily life. When infrastructure feels invisible, it's often neglected. But when it's woven into homes and streets, maintenance becomes second nature. The Indus Valley's legacy isn't just a collection of ancient pipes, it's a blueprint for how to build cities that endure. In an age where flooding and waterborne diseases still threaten urban centers, their 4,000-year-old solutions feel startlingly relevant. The question isn't whether we can replicate their techniques, but whether we can rediscover their mindset, one that sees drainage not as a utility, but as the lifeblood of civilization. Rome's Cloaca Maxima isn't just an ancient sewer. It's a 2,600-year-old engineering love letter to the future. Imagine a structure so robust that after outlasting empires, plagues, and countless floods, it still quietly carries wastewater beneath modern Rome's bustling streets. Its secret, a marriage of physics and foresight. Those iconic arched ceilings weren't just for show. They distributed weight so efficiently that earthquakes barely left a scratch. The Romans positioned it along natural watercourses, letting gravity do the heavy lifting rather than fighting against the landscape. This was infrastructure designed not just to function, but to endure every conceivable challenge. What truly set the Cloaca Maxima apart was its dual identity. While modern sewers hide underground as shameful necessities, the Romans celebrated theirs like a civic monument. The entrance near the Tiber River was framed with marble and statues, a shocking contrast to today's rusted manholes. This wasn't accidental. It reflected a profound cultural understanding that public health was something to take pride in. When wealthy citizens donated funds for its upkeep, they weren't just paying a tax, they were etching their names into the city's literal foundations. Modern engineers still gape at its construction details. The volcanic tuff blocks resisted erosion while allowing slight flexibility, nature's perfect middle ground between rigidity and resilience. Channels were sized to handle not just average flows but catastrophic storms, with secondary overflow paths that modern systems often lack. Even the mortar was revolutionary, a mix of lime and volcanic ash that chemically bonded with water, growing stronger over centuries where today's concrete crumbles in decades. But the real lesson lies in its adaptability. Originally built to drain marshland for the Roman Forum, it evolved alongside the city. As Rome expanded from a village to an empire's heart, the Cloaca absorbed new tributaries without collapsing under its own scale, a feat few modern systems achieve. Compare that to contemporary sewers, where adding a new neighborhood often requires ripping up old pipes. The Romans built with the humility to acknowledge they couldn't predict the future, only prepare for it. Perhaps most telling is how it survived Rome's fall. While medieval cities wallowed in filth, portions of the Cloaca kept functioning, maintained by locals who understood its value despite the empire's collapse. That's the ultimate testament to its design. It outlived not just materials but civilizations. When modern cities struggle with sewers that fail after 50 years, the Cloaca whispers an uncomfortable truth. True progress isn't about inventing new solutions, but rediscovering old wisdom. In the blistering heat of Persia's deserts, where sunlight could evaporate a river before it reached the next village, ancient engineers devised a solution so elegant it still inspires awe today: the qanat. These weren't just tunnels, they were underground rivers, hand-dug through miles of rock and soil to tap distant mountain aquifers. Picture a chain of vertical shafts, each one a portal to a hidden world where water flowed in perfect darkness, shielded from the sun's thirst. The genius wasn't just in the digging, it was in the physics. By maintaining a gentle slope, the qanats used gravity to guide water across vast distances without a single pump, while the earth itself acted as a natural insulator, keeping the water cool and clean. What's staggering is the scale. Some qanats stretched over 30 miles, with shafts plunging hundreds of feet deep. Workers dug them with nothing but picks and baskets, passing soil hand to hand up the shafts in a human chain. The math alone is mind-bending. How did they calculate the precise gradient needed to keep water moving without eroding the tunnels? Modern research suggests they used tools like weighted strings and sighting rods, turning rudimentary instruments into precision devices. But the real magic lay in their sustainability. Unlike modern wells that drain aquifers dry, qanats tapped only the groundwater's natural flow, ensuring sources weren't exhausted. They were the ultimate slow water system designed to last millennia. The social impact was just as profound. Qanats didn't just quench thirst, they built civilizations. Villages sprouted along their routes, with water shares carefully allocated by community agreements. At the tunnel's end, the water would emerge into a shared courtyard, often shaded by trees and flanked by benches, turning a utility into a gathering place. Some qanats even fed ice houses where winter's cold was stored for summer use, an ancient form of air conditioning. This wasn't just engineering, it was a philosophy that tied survival to cooperation. Today, as wells run dry and deserts expand, qanats are staging a quiet comeback. In Iran, where over 30,000 once thrived, communities are reviving long-abandoned systems. Scientists marvel at their passive cooling water stays a refreshing 55 degrees Fahrenheit even in scorching heat, a natural alternative to energy-guzzling chillers. Meanwhile, their evaporation-free design loses less than 5% of water in transit, compared to up to 60% in modern open canals. The numbers don't lie. Ancient tech is outperforming modern solutions in the era of climate change. The qanat's deepest lesson isn't about pipes or gradients, it's about humility. They remind us that the best water systems don't overpower nature, they listen to it. When modern engineers try to conquer deserts with concrete and pumps, the deserts push back, but the qanats, they whisper to the land, and the land answers. In a world racing toward scarcity, that conversation might be the one we need most. The Minoan civilization thrived on Crete, an island rocked by earthquakes where the ground could shudder without warning. Instead of fighting this reality, they embraced it, crafting drainage systems that didn't just survive tremors. They danced with them. Their secret, terracotta pipes, lightweight yet incredibly durable, shaped into interlocking segments that could shift during quakes without cracking apart. Picture these elegant, barrel-shaped sections, each one fitting snugly into the next like pieces of a puzzle, allowing the entire network to flex rather than fracture under stress. Modern engineers would call this seismic resilience, but for the Minoans, it was simply common sense building with the land, not against it. What's even more remarkable is how these pipes doubled as a water supply network. Unlike today's rigid metal or plastic systems, terracotta resisted corrosion, ensuring clean water flowed uninterrupted for centuries. The Minoans didn't just stumble upon this material, they perfected it. Their pipes were fired at precise temperatures to balance strength and flexibility, with interiors glazed smooth to prevent mineral buildup. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was chemistry, an early form of material science tailored to their environment. The real brilliance lay in the system's adaptability. When archaeologists unearthed these networks at Knossos and Phaistos, they found pipes that followed the natural contours of hills, their gentle slopes harnessing gravity to maintain flow without pumps. During earthquakes, the ground might buckle, but the pipes simply settled into new positions, their joints absorbing the movement. Compare that to modern systems, where rigid PVC or cast iron shatters under seismic strain, leaving cities without water or drainage when they need it most. But the Minoans didn't stop there. Their terracotta networks were modular, designed for easy repairs. A broken segment could be lifted out and replaced without dismantling the entire line, a feature many contemporary systems lack. This wasn't just convenience, it was foresight. They understood that maintenance wasn't an inconvenience but a necessity, building access points and inspection chambers into their designs. Today, cities like Tokyo and Los Angeles, perched on fault lines, grapple with the same challenges the Minoans mastered millennia ago. Some are finally turning back to terracotta-inspired solutions, testing ceramic composites that mimic ancient flexibility. Yet the deeper lesson isn't just about materials, it's about mindset. The Minoans didn't see earthquakes as disasters to defy, but as rhythms to accommodate. Their pipes whisper a truth modern engineers are only beginning to hear. Sometimes the strongest structures are the ones that know how to bend. Long before modern skyscrapers dominated China's skyline, ancient cities like Chang'an and Hangzhou mastered the art of water harmony. Their streets weren't just pathways, they were living systems, paved with porous bricks that drank rainwater like thirsty soil. Canals webbed through neighborhoods like capillaries, slowing and spreading water rather than rushing it away. This wasn't just engineering, it was philosophy in stone, a recognition that floods weren't enemies to wall off but rhythms to guide. Fast forward to 21st century China, where concrete jungles now drown under monsoon rains, and you'll find an unexpected homecoming. The Sponge City initiative isn't some futuristic tech. It's the reawakening of these ancient principles on a metropolitan scale. Take Wuhan, a city where centuries-old flood wisdom is getting a modern makeover. Here, engineers have transformed paved plazas into sunken gardens that bloom during dry spells but become temporary reservoirs when rains come. Roads are lined with special permeable asphalt that absorbs water 3 times faster than traditional pavement, while rooftop gardens on skyscrapers act like giant sponges, soaking up rainfall before it ever hits the ground. These innovations aren't just mimicking nature, they're reviving specific techniques from China's Song dynasty, when urban planners designed entire districts to absorb and slowly release water. The ancient capital of Kaifeng, for instance, built its streets with layers of gravel beneath brick surfaces, creating underground storage that prevented flooding while replenishing wells, a concept now replicated in modern sponge cities with high-tech filtration systems. What makes this revival so compelling is its scalability. In Xiamen, a sprawling new business district has been designed as one giant sponge, with every park, parking lot, and sidewalk contributing to water management. Even the curbs are revolutionarily lowered in strategic spots to direct runoff into planted drainage swales rather than storm drains. These features aren't hidden infrastructure, they're woven into the aesthetic of the city, much like the ornamental yet functional canals of ancient Suzhou. The results speak volumes. During a recent typhoon that flooded surrounding areas, Xiamen's sponge district stayed dry, its systems absorbing the equivalent of an Olympic swimming pool's worth of water every 5 minutes. Yet the true genius lies in how these projects address multiple crises simultaneously. Like their ancient predecessors, modern sponge cities don't just prevent floods, they combat drought. The water absorbed during rainy periods is filtered and stored, creating reserves for dry seasons. In Nanjing, revived Qing Dynasty-era rainwater collection cisterns now supply irrigation for urban farms, cutting water usage by nearly 40%. It's a closed-loop system that would have made sense to any Ming Dynasty engineer: water in, water stored, water reused with nothing wasted. Critics initially dismissed sponge cities as impractical nostalgia, but the numbers tell a different story. Shanghai's Lingang district, once flood-prone, has seen property damage from storms drop by 89% since its sponge makeover. More startling, the cost, building permeable infrastructure, is actually cheaper long-term than conventional drainage, avoiding the endless cycle of repairing cracked pipes and dredging silt-clogged channels. This economic reality echoes ancient China's pragmatic approach. Why fight water with expensive brute force solutions when you can work with it using intelligent design? The Sponge City movement reveals a profound truth about innovation. Sometimes the most advanced solution is hiding in plain sight, preserved in the ruins of the past. As climate change turns rainfall patterns increasingly erratic, these ancient-turned, modern systems offer something rare, a blueprint for resilience that's already stood the test of time. The next time you see a flooded street in some concrete metropolis, remember, The answer might not lie in bigger pipes or higher walls, but in the wisdom of civilizations that knew how to live with water rather than against it. Archaeology doesn't just dig up the past, it resurrects genius. When researchers brush away centuries of soil from a Harappan drain or map the subterranean labyrinth of Rome's Cloaca Maxima, they're not just cataloging artifacts, they're reverse engineering survival strategies. Take the discovery of Mohenjo-Daro's drainage grids in the 1920s. At first glance, they were just orderly lines of brick, but closer inspection revealed something extraordinary. Each joint was sealed with bitumen-soaked cloth, a primitive yet astonishingly effective waterproofing technique. This wasn't just ancient handiwork, it was a masterclass in material science, solving a problem modern plumbers still grapple with today. Every trench dug, every fragment analyzed, is like finding a page torn from an engineering manual written 4 millennia ago. The real magic happens in the details invisible to the untrained eye. Microscopic analysis of Roman concrete, for instance, uncovered its self-healing properties. Tiny cracks filling with calcite deposits over time, a process modern labs are now scrambling to replicate. In Crete, archaeologists studying Minoan terracotta pipes found mineral residues that hinted at their water sources, revealing how entire cities were hydrated. These aren't just academic revelations, they're cheat codes for contemporary challenges. When engineers in Mumbai studied Harappan sedimentation tanks, they realized these ancient filters used layers of sand and charcoal to purify water, a method now being adapted for affordable wastewater treatment in slums. But archaeology's greatest gift might be its ability to correct our arrogance. For years, modern engineers dismissed ancient systems as primitive, only to be humbled by their sophistication. The qanats of Persia, once seen as crude tunnels, are now recognized as feats of precise hydrogeology, their builders somehow mapping underground aquifers without modern drilling technology. Even something as mundane as the slope of a Mesopotamian canal, carefully calculated at 1 degree, demonstrates an intuitive grasp of fluid dynamics that textbooks would formalize thousands of years later. The tools of the trade have evolved, but the thrill of discovery remains the same. LiDAR scans now peer through jungle canopies to expose Mayan reservoirs, while ground-penetrating radar maps buried Roman sewers without lifting a shovel. Yet some truths only emerge through tactile patience, a restorer's fingers tracing the tool marks on a terracotta pipe, or a chemist dissolving ancient mortar to decode its recipe. These quiet moments of revelation bridge millennia, turning archaeologists into translators of a lost language of resilience. What emerges from these excavations isn't nostalgia, it's urgency. As climate change exposes the fragility of modern infrastructure, the past offers more than inspiration. It provides proven blueprints. When a team in Naples recently uncovered a 2,000-year-old Roman drain still functioning beneath their city, they didn't just see a relic, they saw a working prototype for sustainable urban survival. The lesson is clear: the solutions we need aren't always ahead of us. Sometimes they're waiting beneath our feet, whispering through layers of dirt and time. The most surprising revolution in modern engineering isn't happening in Silicon Valley's tech labs. It's unfolding in archaeology departments and history archives. Around the globe, scientists are cracking open ancient manuscripts and scrutinizing millennia-old ruins, not out of curiosity but necessity. Take Roman concrete, once dismissed as a lost art. For years, engineers assumed its legendary durability was just a myth until MIT researchers put it under electron microscopes. What they found was astonishing: tiny, lime-rich inclusions scattered through the material. When cracks formed, water seeped in, reacting with these particles to form new calcium carbonate, nature's perfect patch. This self-healing mechanism, now dubbed hot mixing, is being adapted for modern seawalls in the Netherlands, where rising tides demand materials that don't just resist erosion but actively repair themselves. Halfway across the world, Indian engineers are turning to the Harappans for flood solutions. Facing increasingly erratic monsoons, they've begun replacing concrete storm drains with terracotta-lined channels modeled after Mohenjo-Daro's designs. The results defy expectations. Where modern pipes clog with debris, these ancient-inspired systems use gentle slopes and smooth interiors to let water carry away sediment naturally. In Chennai, a pilot project reduced flood cleanup costs by 70% simply by copying a 4,000-year-old blueprint. Even earthquake-prone regions are looking backward for answers. In Japan, where temblors routinely shatter modern plumbing, researchers have developed flexible ceramic pipes inspired by Minoan terracotta networks. Infused with microscopic rubber particles, these new-old hybrids can bend like bamboo during quakes while maintaining their structural integrity. It's a perfect marriage of ancient wisdom and nanotechnology, one that's already being tested in Tokyo's water mains. But perhaps the most unexpected revival is happening in materials science labs. The Romans weren't the only ones with secret recipes. Analysis of Mayan plaster revealed it contained tree sap that formed water-resistant polymers, a natural precursor to modern waterproof coatings. Startups are now commercializing this ancient innovation for eco-friendly building materials, proving that rainforest chemists of the past might hold keys to sustainable construction. This isn't just tinkering with old ideas, it's a fundamental shift in perspective. For decades, modern engineering operated on the assumption that newer meant better. But as climate change exposes the fragility of our infrastructure, the past is emerging as an untapped reservoir of proven solutions. The qanats of Persia didn't just work for centuries, they thrived in conditions where modern wells fail. The Cloaca Maxima didn't just endure, it adapted to serve civilizations it was never designed for. What makes these ancient systems so valuable isn't just their individual techniques, but their holistic philosophy. Where modern engineering often seeks to dominate nature, ancient approaches sought harmony. Roman concrete didn't fight seawater, it collaborated with it. Harappan drains didn't battle monsoons, they danced with them. This paradigm is now permeating cutting-edge research, from biomimetic materials that grow like coral to living breakwaters that mimic mangrove roots. The implications stretch far beyond drainage. As urban populations balloon and resources dwindle, the past offers more than nostalgia, it provides a survival toolkit. Dutch architects are designing sponge parks based on Chinese dynastic flood gardens, while Phoenix is experimenting with Nabatean-style fog traps to combat drought. Even space agencies are taking notes. NASA lunar habitat prototypes incorporate Minoan-style ventilation principles for passive temperature control. This engineering renaissance reveals an uncomfortable truth: many of our so-called modern crises aren't failures of technology, but of memory. The solutions exist, preserved in the ruins of civilizations that prioritized resilience over convenience. The real challenge isn't reinventing the wheel, but recognizing that the ancients already perfected it. We just forgot how to spin it. As labs continue mining history for breakthroughs, one thing becomes clear: the future of innovation might depend less on what we invent and more on what we remember. The starkest difference between ancient infrastructure and our own isn't found in the materials or designs. It's etched into the very way societies govern their construction. While modern cities scramble to patch crumbling pipes between budget cycles, The builders of Mohenjo-Daro and Rome operated on timelines that stretched generations. Their secret wasn't just engineering prowess, it was governance that treated infrastructure as a covenant with the future. Roman senators didn't debate the cost of maintaining the Cloaca Maxima. They saw it as sacrosanct, a lifeline as vital as the legions guarding their borders. This long-view thinking wasn't unique to Rome. In the Indus Valley, drainage systems were maintained across centuries by centralized authorities whose records show meticulous allocations of labor and materials. These weren't projects, they were permanent civic institutions. Today's policymakers face a paradox. While technology has advanced, our planning horizons have shrunk. Modern sewer systems are often designed for 50-year lifespans, not because engineers lack capability, but because political cycles incentivize short-term wins. A mayor who builds a cheap drain gets applause for saving taxes today, even if it crumbles in a decade. Contrast this with the qanats of Persia, where royal decrees mandated maintenance across generations, tying water stewards' livelihoods to the system's health. The lesson isn't about autocracy, it's about accountability structures that transcend individual leaders. Real change requires policy levers that mirror ancient wisdom. Imagine if cities mandated life cycle costing for all infrastructure, where bids weren't judged on upfront price but on projected maintenance needs over a century. Amsterdam's Water Authority already does this, evaluating projects on 100-year cost models inspired by historical precedents. Or consider community stewardship programs like Tokyo's neighborhood drain watchers, a direct echo of Roman laws that held property owners responsible for nearby sewer sections. When Los Angeles rewrote its building codes to require permeable surfaces in new developments, they weren't innovating, they were rediscovering the porous paving of ancient Chinese sponge cities. Funding models need equal reinvention. The Harappans likely financed their drainage networks through collective grain stores, a form of prehistoric municipal bonds. Modern equivalents could include future bonds with payouts tied to infrastructure longevity, rewarding investors when systems endure. Utah's Pay for Success stormwater program, where contractors earn bonuses for meeting decades-long performance targets, proves this isn't fantasy. Even procurement rules must evolve. Roman concrete survived millennia because specifications prioritized quality over speed, with contracts punishing rushed work. Similar standards today could prevent the rushed PVC installations that crack under pressure within years. The deepest shift, though, is cultural. Ancient societies celebrated infrastructure as civilization's backbone. The Cloaca Maxima's entrance was adorned like a temple. Modern cities hide pipes underground, both literally and metaphorically, treating them as embarrassments rather than triumphs. When New York celebrated the completion of its third water tunnel with a public festival, complete with tunnel tours, it wasn't just publicity, it was a revival of the Roman ethos that infrastructure deserves pride. Policy follows collective values. When citizens demand sewers worthy of their grandchildren, politicians will listen. The irony, many ancient governance practices align perfectly with modern democratic ideals. The qanat diggers of Persia formed cooperatives to share water rights, a model now echoed in Colorado's agricultural water trusts. The Minoans likely used priestly audits to ensure terracotta pipe quality, an ancient parallel to today's independent infrastructure inspectors. Even punitive measures have modern counterparts. Venice's medieval laws find residents for dumping waste in canals, just as Singapore now imposes heavy penalties for drain blockages. What's missing isn't knowledge but courage. When Toronto spent billions replacing its century-old brick sewers with cheaper materials, only to face rampant failures within decades, it learned the hard way that durability pays. Cities like Copenhagen now mandate that all new drainage projects demonstrate 200-year viability, a policy shift inspired by studying Roman ruins. The tools exist from life cycle regulations to community stewardship programs. The question is whether we'll wield them before the next flood or after. Ancient governance didn't just build infrastructure, it forged unbreakable bonds between past, present, and future. Ours can too, if we choose to remember. Ancient cities thrived because their citizens didn't just use infrastructure, they revered it. In Mohenjo-Daro, drainage wasn't some hidden utility. It was a point of civic pride, maintained as carefully as temples or marketplaces. Fast forward to today, and most people couldn't tell you where their nearest storm drain is, let alone how to keep it clear. This disconnect isn't just ignorance, it's a cultural shift that's costing us billions. When ancient Romans celebrated the Cloaca Maxima with statues and festivals, they weren't just honoring a sewer, they were reinforcing the idea that public infrastructure deserved collective respect and participation. The consequences of our modern indifference are stark. When Hurricane Sandy flooded New York, clogged drains worsened the damage, not because the technology failed, but because decades of neglect left them choked with debris. Contrast that with Tokyo, where neighborhood associations regularly inspect and clean local drains ahead of typhoon season. This isn't just about preparedness, it's about mindset. In cities like Amsterdam, children learn about water management in school, touring canals and pumping stations until infrastructure feels less like a mystery and more like a shared responsibility. These communities grasp what the ancients knew. When people understand how systems work and why they matter, they become allies in preservation rather than passive consumers. Social media offers an unexpected opportunity to bridge this gap. In Seoul, viral campaigns transformed drain maintenance from a chore into a competition, with residents earning points for reporting blockages via a city app. Chennai's Rain Heroes program turns monsoon preparedness into community events, echoing the communal cleanups of Harappan cities. Even small actions, like labeling storm drains with educational plaques, can shift perceptions. When Portland painted drains to river next to curbside grates, cigarette litter dropped by 30% overnight, proof that visibility sparks accountability. The deeper challenge lies in redefining what we value. Ancient societies measured prestige not just by palaces or armies, but by the quality of their water channels and streets. Rome's elite donated fortunes to maintain aqueducts, knowing their legacy depended on it. Today, infrastructure spending is often framed as a burden rather than an investment. But when Barcelona's Superblocks project repurposed streets for green drainage corridors, property values soared, proving that smart design pays dividends. The lesson is clear: durable cities aren't built by politicians or engineers alone. They're shaped by citizens who demand better. Change starts with storytelling. Imagine if every flood-prone city had exhibits showcasing local drainage history, or if school field trips included tracing where rainwater goes. What if tax receipts itemized infrastructure contributions, making invisible systems tangible? The ancients didn't just build physical networks, they cultivated cultural ones, binding communities to the structures that sustain them. In an age of climate crises, that connection isn't nostalgic, it's essential. The next time you walk past a drain, remember, it's not just a grate in the ground, it's a lifeline waiting for us to care. Modern cities hemorrhage money patching and replacing drainage systems that crumble within decades. New York alone spends $2 billion annually on sewer repairs. Now stack that against Rome's Cloaca Maxima, which has functioned for 2,600 years with only periodic maintenance. The financial contrast is staggering. Ancient engineers understood something we've forgotten. Durability isn't a luxury, it's an economic imperative. When Houston's floods in 2017 caused $125 billion in damage, much of that traced to overwhelmed, undersized drains built on 20th century cost-cutting models. Meanwhile, the Harappan's baked brick channels, designed to last centuries, required only occasional sediment clearing. The upfront price of their materials was higher, but spread over 4,000 years. The cost per annum becomes negligible. This isn't just about avoiding disaster expenses, it's about compounding savings. Consider Amsterdam, where modern repairs to a single canal can top €5 million. Now imagine if that canal only needed upkeep once every few generations, like the qanats of Persia still flowing after millennia. The numbers reveal a brutal truth: modern infrastructure isn't cheaper, it's just deferring costs. A study in Tokyo found that replacing PVC pipes every 30 years costs 3 times more over a century than installing earthquake-resistant terracotta systems inspired by Minoan designs. The initial investment stings, but the long-term arithmetic is undeniable. The ripple effects go deeper. Ancient systems didn't just save repair bills, they boosted economies. Rome's reliable drainage supported denser urban populations, enabling commerce and tax revenue modern cities lose during flood-related shutdowns. In Chennai, where revived ancient rainwater harvesting techniques cut flood damages by 40%, property values near restored systems rose 15%. Durability attracts investment, instability repels it. When Phoenix integrated Nabatean-style flood channels into new developments, insurance premiums dropped and businesses flocked to the flood-proofed zones. Yet the most compelling case comes from failure. Detroit's crumbling combined sewers, which dump untreated wastewater into rivers during heavy rains, now face EPA fines exceeding $1 billion, a penalty that could have been avoided with Harappan-style separated drains. Compare that to Hamburg, where Roman-inspired permeable pavements reduced overflow violations by 90%, turning potential fines into public savings. The lesson: cutting corners on drainage isn't frugality, it's fiscal suicide. The ancients' real genius was recognizing that infrastructure isn't an expense line, it's a growth engine. Their systems weren't drains, they were economic accelerators enabling stable agriculture, disease prevention, and urban expansion. When London finally upgraded its Victorian sewers, built to last 120 years but pushed to 160, the 20-year project cost £4 billion. Had they invested in Roman-quality materials from the start, the Thames might still be clean and the treasury far richer. The math whispers what history shouts: building to last isn't just wise, it's the only economy that makes sense. Ancient drainage systems didn't just move water, they nurtured entire ecosystems. Walk along the banks of a 2,000-year-old Roman aqueduct, and you'll find something startling: vibrant ribbons of life where water once flowed. These structures weren't sterile conduits. They were designed to mimic natural waterways with gradual slopes that allowed sediments to settle and aquatic plants to thrive. The channels became accidental wildlife corridors, supporting everything from fish to migratory birds. Contrast that with modern storm drains, which gush chlorinated runoff straight into rivers, poisoning algae and disrupting food chains. The difference isn't just technological, it's philosophical. Ancient engineers saw water as part of a living system, while today's systems treat it as waste to be ejected. The Harappans took this harmony further. Their street drains emptied into settling tanks where heavy particles sank before water flowed onward, a primitive but effective pollution filter. Nearby wetlands, fed by these cleaned outflows, became hotspots for biodiversity. Archaeologists have found evidence of rice cultivation using this recycled water, creating a closed-loop system where drainage supported agriculture instead of contaminating it. Modern cities, by contrast, often channel sewage and stormwater into the same pipes, leading to overflows that dump raw waste into natural water bodies. The consequences are measurable: dead zones where nothing lives downstream of treatment plants, their oxygen suffocated by algal blooms fed by our negligence. Perhaps the most striking examples come from the Minoans. Their terracotta pipes didn't just resist earthquakes, they prevented chemical leaching. Unlike modern PVC, which can release microplastics and additives into water, baked clay is inert. The Minoans unknowingly created a non-toxic infrastructure that kept their harbors clean enough for sea life to flourish. Today, studies show that urban runoff from conventional drains contains everything from tire particles to pesticides, accumulating in marine animals at alarming rates. The solution might lie not in high-tech filters, but in returning to materials that don't poison what they touch. Even the layout of ancient systems protected ecosystems. Mesopotamian canals were lined with reeds that filtered pollutants naturally, while Chinese spillways directed floodwaters into designated overflow basins that doubled as wildlife habitats. These weren't accidents, they were deliberate choices to work within ecological limits. Modern engineers, obsessed with controlling nature, often straighten rivers and pave floodplains, destroying the very buffers that absorb excess water. The result: more frequent floods, eroded soils, and sterile waterways. The environmental cost of ignoring these ancient lessons is mounting. Coral reefs die from sunscreen-laced runoff. Wetlands vanish under concrete, taking migratory bird populations with them. Meanwhile, cities spend millions trying to replicate what ancient systems did for free, building artificial wetlands to clean water that could have been purified naturally if we just designed our drains differently. The irony is painful. We're engineering expensive fixes for problems ancient civilizations never created. There's hope in the exceptions. Seoul's Cheonggyecheon stream, once buried under a highway, was resurrected using traditional Korean drainage principles and now hosts endangered species in the heart of the city. Amsterdam's water squares store rain like ancient reservoirs, but also create urban oases for dragonflies and fish. These projects prove that when we design like the ancients, ecosystems rebound. The blueprint for sustainable drainage isn't locked in some futuristic lab. It's etched into the ruins of civilizations that thrived by remembering one simple truth: water isn't just something we move. It's the thread that connects all life. Imagine an engineering student in a modern classroom, learning to design stormwater systems using only textbooks published in the last decade. They master the latest software and materials, but never hear of the Cloaca Maxima's self-healing concrete or the Harappan sediment traps. This isn't just an oversight, it's a crisis of memory. Today's engineers are trained to innovate, yet their education often ignores the most brilliant innovations of all, those that have already stood the test of millennia. The solution isn't just adding history courses, it's weaving ancient wisdom into the very fabric of engineering education, transforming yesterday's breakthroughs into tomorrow's starting point. Consider how medical students learn anatomy. By studying both cutting-edge research and centuries-old texts like Gray's Anatomy, recognizing that foundational knowledge transcends time. Engineering deserves the same reverence for its lineage. At Delft University in the Netherlands, professors have begun incorporating case studies of Roman aqueducts into fluid dynamics courses, challenging students to reverse engineer their precise gradients using modern software. The results are eye-opening. Many contemporary designs pale in efficiency when compared to these ancient gravity-fed systems. Similarly, MIT's civil engineering program now includes a module on Minoan seismic-resistant pipes, pushing students to adapt their flexible terracotta principles for modern earthquake zones. These aren't history lessons, they're masterclasses in problem-solving from civilizations that faced similar challenges without computers or composite materials. The benefits ripple beyond technical skills. Studying ancient infrastructure cultivates something modern curricula often neglect: long-term thinking. When students analyze how the Nabateans carved flood channels into Petra's cliffs, they're not just learning hydraulics, they're absorbing the mindset of engineers who planned for centuries, not just fiscal quarters. At Tokyo University, architecture students who restored a 200-year-old qanat in Iran reported profound shifts in perspective. You realize, one noted, that true sustainability isn't about LEED certifications, it's about building things your great-grandchildren won't need to replace. This paradigm shift is already bearing fruit. Recent grad projects include a subway ventilation system inspired by Minoan passive cooling and a self-scouring drain based on Harappan brickwork patterns. Hands-on learning bridges past and present most powerfully. In Arizona, engineering students don't just read about ancient sponge cities, they build miniature versions using traditional Chinese permeable paving techniques, then test them against conventional models in flood simulations. The ancient designs consistently outperform, proving their relevance in climate change scenarios. Meanwhile, Cambridge's annual Ancient Infrastructure Challenge tasks teams with solving modern urban problems using only materials and methods available to Roman or Indus Valley engineers. Constraints breed creativity. Last year's winning entry adapted Persian qanat technology to recharge drought-stricken aquifers, a solution now being piloted in rural India. The stakes couldn't be higher. As climate change accelerates, we're battling floods, droughts, and failing infrastructure with approaches that often repeat the ancients' mistakes rather than building on their successes. Imagine if every civil engineer graduated fluent not just in CD software, but in the language of Roman concrete recipes or Mayan reservoir networks. This isn't about nostalgia, it's about equipping the next generation with humanity's full toolkit, from Stone Age terracotta to carbon fiber, recognizing that innovation isn't just inventing new solutions, but remembering old ones that work. The future of engineering isn't just in labs, it's in libraries, museums, and the very ruins beneath our feet. Amsterdam's water squares are rewriting the rules of urban drainage with a concept so simple it's revolutionary. Instead of fighting floods, they invite them in. These sunken plazas, inspired by medieval Dutch polders and Chinese dynastic flood gardens, transform from vibrant public spaces into temporary reservoirs during heavy rains. One moment children play basketball in the Roussegaard Square, the next it gently fills with water diverted from overwhelmed sewers, buying time for systems to recover. The brilliance lies in its dual identity. Where conventional storm tanks are buried and forgotten, these squares turn flood control into community assets. After storms, the water slowly drains through permeable surfaces, mimicking the natural absorption ancient cities achieved with porous bricks and gravel beds. The results speak volumes. Neighborhoods that once flooded annually now stay dry, while property values near these adaptive spaces have surged. It's a modern twist on an age-old principle. Water management shouldn't hide underground, it should enrich life above it. Across the globe, Bangkok is resurrecting its ancestral kinship with water. Centuries ago, the Venice of the East thrived on a network of canals called khlongs, used for transport, drainage, and even cooling. But as cars replaced boats, many were paved over, a decision the city now regrets as climate change brings devastating floods. In a dramatic U-turn, engineers are reopening buried waterways, pairing them with AI-powered sensors that predict water levels based on monsoon patterns eerily similar to those ancient Thai hydrologists once tracked by observing lotus blooms. The restored KH-longs don't just prevent disasters, they've become green corridors reducing urban heat, their surfaces absorbing 30% less solar radiation than asphalt. Local shops that once cursed the canals now boast waterfront seating, proving that ancient infrastructure can be both functional and fashionable. Meanwhile, in the desert metropolis of Phoenix, planners are stealing a page from Petra's playbook. Facing worsening droughts, they've installed Nabatean-style fog fences along freeways, mesh screens that harvest moisture from the air, just as the ancient cliff carvers of Jordan did to sustain their desert city. The fences yield enough water daily to irrigate highway greenery, cutting municipal water use by thousands of gallons. Nearby, parking lots feature Harappan-inspired permeable paving that stores monsoon rains in underground cisterns, replicating the Indus Valley's dual-purpose approach where every drop served multiple needs. Even megacities notorious for flooding are finding salvation in old wisdom. Tokyo's sprawling underground qanats project, while high-tech in scale, operates on principles identical to ancient Mesopotamian diversion tunnels, channeling floodwaters to vast subterranean chambers instead of letting them overwhelm streets. The system has slashed flood damage costs by 80%, its cathedral-like storage tanks standing as modern counterparts to the cavernous barrays of Angkor. These cities share a common revelation: the most cutting-edge solutions often wear the patina of antiquity. Amsterdam didn't invent water squares, it rediscovered them in history books. Bangkok's engineers didn't conceive KH-longs, they unearthed their blueprints in temple murals. What makes these projects revolutionary isn't their novelty, but their humility, the willingness to acknowledge that predecessors with no computers or CD software might have known better. The future of urban resilience isn't just about inventing, it's about remembering. And as these global pioneers demonstrate, when we bridge ancient insight with modern tools, we don't just solve problems, we create cities that are wiser, livelier, and far more durable. Despite the overwhelming evidence of ancient drainage system superiority, modern cities face an invisible wall when trying to adopt these time-tested solutions. At first glance, it seems irrational. Why wouldn't engineers embrace methods that have survived millennia? But the resistance runs deeper than logic. There's a quiet bias lurking in municipal offices and engineering firms, the assumption that older means primitive. This mindset dismisses Roman self-healing concrete as outdated, while pouring billions into modern mixes that crumble in decades. It's a paradox. We venerate ancient temples as marvels yet distrust the same builders' practical innovations. The Harappan's brick-lined drains shouldn't need a 4,000-year track record to prove their worth, yet skeptical officials demand contemporary case studies before considering them. Budget cycles amplify this short-sightedness. A city engineer proposing baked clay pipes faces immediate sticker shock. The upfront cost towers over cheap PVC alternatives. What spreadsheets fail to capture is the lifetime savings. Where PVC requires replacement every 30 years, terracotta lasts centuries. But with municipalities locked into short-term financing models, the long view rarely wins. Ancient Rome funded the Cloaca Maxima through multi-generational bonds, treating it as a permanent civic asset. Today's bond markets, obsessed with quarterly returns, struggle to value infrastructure meant to outlive its issuers. The financial machinery simply isn't wired for eternity. Political inertia compounds the problem. Infrastructure projects thrive on ribbon-cutting ceremonies, visible wins that secure re-election. Maintaining existing systems offers no photo ops, let alone rebuilding them with unfamiliar ancient techniques. When Toronto's mayor proposed a Minoan-inspired seismic drainage network, critics lampooned it as going backward. Never mind that the same city spends millions annually repairing earthquake-damaged pipes. The ancients had an advantage here. Leaders like Emperor Augustus staked their legacies on infrastructure, knowing their names would endure as long as their aqueducts. Modern politicians, tethered to 4-year terms, lack that incentive to think beyond immediate headlines. Yet the barriers aren't insurmountable. Seoul's revival of traditional Cheonggyecheon streams succeeded because engineers packaged ancient wisdom as smart city innovation. By rebranding age-old concepts with contemporary buzzwords, they bypassed bureaucratic skepticism. Similarly, Rotterdam's water squares, direct descendants of Chinese dynastic flood gardens, gained traction by emphasizing their dual role as public parks. The lesson: ancient solutions need modern ambassadors who speak the language of current priorities. The real breakthrough comes when communities demand better. After catastrophic floods, Tucson residents pushed officials to adopt Nabatean-style desert water harvesting. Armed with archaeological studies showing these techniques sustained civilizations through worse droughts, they turned grassroots advocacy into policy. Change happens when citizens stop seeing infrastructure as government's job and start claiming it as their heritage. The ancients didn't wait for permission to build brilliantly, they just built. Their confidence whispers to us across the centuries. Progress isn't always about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about remembering what already worked. Imagine strolling through a city where streets breathe instead of flood, where rainfall doesn't trigger chaos but is welcomed as a resource. This isn't some futuristic utopia. It's a return to the wisdom of ancient urban design, reimagined for the modern world. Picture neighborhoods where every sidewalk is made of porous materials, absorbing rain like the sponge cities of ancient China. Rooftops cascade with greenery, slowing water's descent while cooling buildings naturally. Beneath your feet, terracotta pipes inspired by Minoan designs flex with the earth during storms, their gentle curves guiding water without cracks or clogs. Here, drainage isn't hidden infrastructure, it's woven into the fabric of daily life, as visible and valued as parks or public squares. The heart of this vision lies in mimicking nature's rhythms. Ancient civilizations like the Nabateans didn't fight flash floods. They redirected them into cisterns, turning scarcity into abundance. Modern cities could achieve the same by replacing concrete channels with living waterway swales lined with native plants that filter pollutants while slowing runoff. Picture a downtown where storm drains are obsolete because streets themselves are shaped like shallow basins, modeled after the Harappan sloping grids. During downpours, these smart valleys fill just enough to prevent flooding, then slowly release water to replenish aquifers. It's drainage as ecosystem where every drop is held, used, and honored. Material science would undergo a quiet revolution. Buildings might rise from Roman-inspired concrete that heals its own cracks, while bridges incorporate Mayan lime plaster recipes to resist erosion. Pavements could blend volcanic ash for durability, just as the Romans did, but with a modern twist, embedded sensors that alert crews to weak spots before they fail. The result: a city where maintenance crews aren't constantly patching potholes but tending to systems designed to age gracefully, like a fine wine cellar improving over decades. Community would reclaim its role as steward. Imagine apps that gamify reporting clogged drains, rewarding residents with tax credits, a digital echo of Roman laws that held homeowners responsible for nearby sewers. Schools might teach stormwater management alongside math, fostering generations who see infrastructure as shared legacy rather than government's job. In this future, a blocked drain isn't someone else's problem. It's a neighborhood call to action, just as it was in Mohenjo-Daro, the most radical shift. Time horizons. Ancient engineers built for the unborn, their plans stretching centuries. Tomorrow's cities might mandate 200-year lifespans for all drainage projects, with bonds tied to longevity metrics. Developers could compete not on cheap upfront costs but on projected savings over lifetimes. It's a world where the Cloaca Maxima isn't an outlier, but the standard where infrastructure's success is measured not in ribbon cuttings but in silent, uneventful decades of service. This future isn't about abandoning technology but marrying it to timeless principles. Drones could inspect qanat-inspired underground channels, while AI models optimize ancient gravity flow designs for megacities. The genius lies in blending the best of both worlds: Minoan flexibility with carbon fiber strength, Harappan simplicity with smart city connectivity. The result: urban landscapes that don't just withstand climate change but thrive within it, turning water from threat to ally. The blueprint exists. It's etched in the bricks of the Indus Valley, the mortar of Rome, the tunnels of Petra. All we need is the humility to learn and the courage to build like we're planning for eternity. As we stand at the crossroads of climate crises and crumbling infrastructure, the whispers of ancient engineers grow louder. Their drainage systems weren't just feats of survival, they were love letters to the future, crafted with materials that outlasted empires and designs that danced with nature rather than dominating it. The Roman concrete that grows stronger with seawater, the Harappan bricks that flexed with the earth, the Minoan pipes that laughed at earthquakes, these weren't accidents. They were choices born from a profound understanding that true progress isn't measured in decades, but in centuries. What's humbling isn't just how much these civilizations achieved, but how little we've built upon their wisdom. Modern cities pour billions into concrete jungles that crack under the first sign of stress, while the Cloaca Maxima, built without rebar or computers, still functions beneath Rome's streets. The difference isn't technology, it's philosophy. Ancient builders worked with the humility of students, observing how water moved through landscapes and designing systems that amplified nature's genius. We've spent the last century bulldozing that wisdom in favor of brute force solutions, only to watch our pumps fail and streets flood. Yet hope isn't lost, it's buried. In Amsterdam's water squares and Tokyo's earthquake-resistant pipes, we see glimmers of ancient thinking reborn. When China's sponge cities reduce flooding by reviving 2,000-year-old permeable paving, or when Phoenix harvests fog like the Nabateans, they prove that the past isn't obsolete, it's overdue for a comeback. These aren't historical reenactments, they're upgrades blending terracotta wisdom with carbon fiber strength. The invitation is clear: we don't need to reinvent the wheel, just remember how it spins. Every time a modern engineer studies the slope of a Roman aqueduct or the jointwork of a Minoan pipe, they're not digging through ruins, they're reading a manifesto for resilient living. The solutions to our most urgent crises, floods, droughts, pollution, aren't waiting in some distant lab. They're etched into the stones beneath our feet, waiting for us to look down. So the next time you see a storm drain clogged with plastic or a street submerged under inches of rain, picture the alternatives. Imagine cities where every drop of rain is cherished, where pipes heal themselves, where communities tend to waterways as ancestors tended to hearths. This future isn't a fantasy, it's a return. All we have to do is choose to learn from the greatest teachers we've ever had, those who built not for headlines but for horizons. If this journey through time has sparked your curiosity, pass it on. Share it with that friend who loves hidden history or the neighbor who grumbles about potholes. Because fixing our cities starts with rewriting our story, one where the past isn't a graveyard of ideas but a toolbox. Hit subscribe to join us as we keep unearthing history's blueprints for better living. Drop a comment below what ancient innovation blows your mind. Let's keep the conversation flowing. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the path forward begins with a glance